residential on the ground floor and that has a parking garage underground. We certainly don't contest that claim, but the question at hand here is not really what design represents the least risk. If that is the standard, then the least risk of all would be to not build a building of any kind until the SVE system can be shut down. Nobody is proposing that. The question here is, in 2005, there were a series of mediation engineering remedies that were proposed for a site which made it possible to build with underground construction and with residential at grade. And that was considered to bring the level of risk for vapor migration from the soil down to a safe level, such that the MPCA approved the project. So is there something that has happened between now and then, despite the fact that the site is significantly cleaner than it was at that time, that makes a similar set of measures unable to reduce the risk down to a safe level? That's really the question that needs to be answered. I'm sure you can refer back to Landmark if necessary, but as far as I can tell, there isn't anything that they have presented here that suggests that that is the case. In fact, it's a bit strange that almost all the evidence that they have presented is evidence from 2005, 2006, 2007. It doesn't actually deal with the current condition of the soil. I myself am not obviously a environmental toxicologist. But I do have a friend from high school who's an environmental toxicologist. Okay, these are his credentials on the first page, but to be clear, he is not giving any sort of an official evaluation. I originally approached him to ask me if he could put me in contact with somebody that I could hire to take a look at this information. He told me that he didn't think that that was financially feasible or possible in the time frame that we had. So he just is giving me an informal opinion, which is in his private email. So I don't want to make any misunderstanding about this. I do want to direct you down to the third paragraph. This is on the second page of your packet. It says, I did not find Landmark's conclusion opinion that the potential impacts to indoor air and the risk to human health for future occupants of the proposed building will increase if the building is constructed with an underground parking garage as compared to a building with a first floor parking garage, all that compelling since they really didn't provide evidence for their conclusion opinion. He suggested if we have time that we ask for Landmark's supplemental phase 2 investigation report, which presumably would have the results of the volatile organic compound soil tests that they make reference to, but I didn't really have time for that. If there's something in that supplemental investigative report that suggests, again, the question is not about increased risk. The question is it the case that the series of remediation measures that were recommended by the MPCA for the earlier design in 2005, namely continuing operation of the SVE system, a ventilation system in the underground construction, and engineered membrane between the ground floor and the soil, are those things incapable of bringing the level of safety down to an acceptable level? That's the question that needs to be asked. Okay. Number 4. This is getting back to Landmark's presentation that you just heard, which is a quotation from this 2007 document from the MPCA. He read the quote already. It is this memorandum from Steve Schaff, dated March 5th, 2007, that only slab at grade construction will be allowed for residential units constructed at the site. When I saw this appeal, I was curious about this, so I contacted, I believe his name is Tim Lokrum, who is now the contact person at the MPCA responsible for the application. By the way, the application was submitted immediately after our appeal, so I can assume that it was submitted as a direct response for our appeal. Let me just read you this letter from Tim Lokram. Again, this is on page 3 of the packet that I gave you. I asked him if this quotation from this 2007 document was still binding. Here's what he has to say. Hi, Giancarlo. I've spoken to several folks about your question. My understanding is that the document you reference, in other words, this document that was quoted by Landmark, was developed for the approved development plan at the time, in 2005, which was included as an attachment figure in the document submitted by Landmark. At the time of the development plan, the proposed slab-on-grade structure had been approved by the city and the neighborhood group. I'll add, this has not been approved by the neighborhood group. However, there is nothing that precludes a future developer from building an underground parking structure into their development plan if they desire, as long as the excavated soil is managed properly and the SVA system is reinstalled after completion of construction activities. I don't know if you get a lot of smoking guns at the Planning and Zoning Commission, but that seems like pretty close to a smoking gun as far as I can tell. Okay, I've taken a lot of your time. I'm almost done. I just want to say 2 more things very briefly. First is about the difficulty that this site has had attracting development and the fact that it has been empty for the last 10 years. The staff report says that this is at least part because of the soil conditions, and that's true. The original proposal that was developed and approved in 2005 was not completed because it was approved before the soil reconditioning of Hennepin County. That soil reconditioning ended up taking a lot more time than was originally anticipated. By the time that it was completed in late 2006, another revised plan was submitted and approved. By that point, however, it's now early 2007. We are entering the real estate crisis. This is the beginning of an extended period of distress for our neighborhood as neighborhoods across the country. Lots of mortgages, foreclosures, lots of closed office buildings. I do not think anything would be built at that site under any conditions, regardless of the zoning. Over the last 2 or 3 years, however, our neighborhood has gone through a renaissance. There are several high capital-intensive, extremely creative renovations of 19th century buildings, including the 2 buildings immediately to the west of this property. This property is across the street from a preservation district. It's surrounded on 3 sides by 19th century buildings. It has become a magnet for the creative economy. Within 1 block radius of this site, there are multiple architectural firms, multiple design firms, multiple art studios, multiple art galleries, and multiple performance spaces. These are all the kinds of businesses that have been attracted to the area precisely because of its architectural character. Many of these newly arrived businesses are signatories to our petition expressing concerns about the variance. So, and I should add that the property itself has started to attract considerable interest from multiple developers. This is a proposal that was submitted to the Whittier Community Issues meeting in March of this year for the site. Again, very much in line with what we thought we were originally going to get in 2005. Very thoughtful design, family friendly, met with near unanimous approval. I do not think in this case that the danger you are facing is that this site is going to have difficulty attracting developers. I think the danger is that heavy-handed development is possibly going to threaten the really interesting and exciting developments that have been happening at this small corner of the city. Last thing I want to say, this development has caused a lot of stress on our street. There's already 1 person who has arranged to sell his house and move away. There are other people on our block who have put off long-standing plans to renovate their houses because they don't know how much longer they can stay in the neighborhood. There are multiple business leaders who have expressed second thoughts about their decision to have invested in this neighborhood to begin with. And generally speaking, there's a level of frustration towards the developers, disillusionment with the consultative process, confusion about the condition of the soil, cynicism about the priorities of the city. It's been very upsetting to see, and the good news is that it is very easily remedied. Accepting our appeal has almost no downside. It's certainly not the case that a building that is 20% smaller than this building without a $1 million parking lot is not going to be financially viable. It's not a choice between the building that the developers are presenting and no building at all. It's simply a choice between a building that they're presenting and a building that is just a little bit smaller, a little bit more thoughtful, a little bit more respectful of its surroundings, the kind of building that will restore our confidence in the future of our neighborhood and our confidence in the priorities of the city. You have lots of difficult choices, but this is not one of them. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay, we'll allow anyone else who would like to speak to come on up. We will ask that you stick to 2 minutes. That was a very thorough presentation. Thank you. So we will ask that folks try not to repeat what has been presented, and please come on up, state your name and address for the record, and we'll begin whenever you're ready.
Hi, I'm Dave LaViolet. I live at 2721 Stevens. I've been a resident of Whittier for 30 years and very active in the community. I was there in the when the original changes were made in 2005 regarding the change from R3 to C2. I just want to say that I've never, well, let's just say rarely have I ever seen a process go through as fast as this one. It seemed like it was rushed through versus, you know, maybe consulting with the neighborhood a little more. And considering what's going on now with the Nicollet Lake thing, situation, I was supportive of that, but if this is how things are going to have to be done, where we're going to have 5-story buildings and crowded, you know, small apartments, I'm not sure opening up Nicollet is such a great idea anymore. So I just think that this has been rushed through way too fast with not a lot of thought. And I hate to see that happen with Nicollet too. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Next person, please come on up and state your name and address for the record.
My name is Mike Geardy. I live at 261315 Stevens, across the street from the development. I'm all for what he said, all against what they said. We don't want the higher density and stuff. He put out the facts, okay? I went around on the bus. They came and consulted with the neighborhood. They got us together. We drove around on the bus to see some of their other condo developments like that. And so we approved them. That's why it looked like a good thing. But then when they started construction and they got down on the ground there, they found hidden stuff that the Superfund guys didn't remove that they were supposed to. So that's what happened. Boom, it stopped it dead. And this type of design is so much better than having a warehouse type apartment that we're against. And I'm Ms. Benner. I'm surprised you approve of it. You're our neighborhood people. We have a unique neighborhood. When Nicollet Avenue opens up, it's going to get more unique. But if we start allowing this type of construction, it'll pop up everywhere. And that'll decrease the quality of the neighborhood, decrease the amount of family-friendly people. He explained why the parking thing, which we don't have to get into again, but it is approved. I have a basement in my building. They put an aeration thing in my floor way, way back, and it pumps the air out from underneath the floor going up through the chimney. And but they said there's no problem as far as the building was concerned, but on the second story we have apartments up there, and so they're fudging the truth too much, just stretching it around for this, and the hurry up thing tells you right then there something's fishy because they want to jam it through instead of getting the consultation. And if we didn't get a hold of MPCA until that time, they're like, what? We didn't know anything about this. And so all of a sudden now they're consulting with them. So it's a little goofy. So we totally reject the high density stuff. We totally reject not having parking because there's no parking already. And remember, over 99% of people that ride bicycles also have a car that they got to park somewhere. So thank you.
Thank you, sir.
2 minutes, right there.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak? Please come on up, state your name and address for the record.
I'll make this very short too. I live on the block and I've lived there for more than 20 years. My name is Jorge Rivas. And I basically just want to support everything that's been said so far, especially what Mr. Casale presented, which he was kind of acting as our representative for the neighborhood. And as Mr. Casale said, it's not like we're asking for a lot here. We're not trying to block development. We're just asking for the variances not to be granted. And the reason The original reasons given by the developers to not build an underground parking lot was that the soil was too contaminated. When we contacted the MPCA said that wasn't the case and could be removed down to 15 feet easily without any special expense for contaminated soil. So now we see that there's new reasons, which are that the ventilation system would have to be removed in its entirety and replaced, whereas under their current plan, it would have to be partly removed and replaced. But again, expense shouldn't be a reason for granting variances anyway. And the last thing I wanted to say is that the neighborhood, one thing that wasn't mentioned in this meeting is that the neighborhood is already very short on parking. It's extremely crowded as it is. And adding 70 units to that neighborhood with an average household car ownership could easily add over 100 cars. So it's already a crowded neighborhood. It's already difficult to find parking, and they're asking to get variance to not have to build more parking spaces. So, and that's not even including the fact that it includes commercial establishments. So that would be even more strain on the parking. So in essence, granting a variance allows the developer to include fewer additional parking spaces, which saves them money but places a huge burden on the neighborhood. And everything else that, in order to save time, everything else I was going to say was already said by the other.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Come on up.
Hello, I'm Brian Foster. I live at 2626 Stevens. I've lived there since 1990. And the reason I don't like this development is because it seems too massive for the neighborhood. And like everybody else has said, that there's Stevens Avenue is a no emergency route, and they're going to be taking more parking spots away from 26th Street when they put a bike lane on the south side of 26th Street. So we're taking away more parking spots. What are people supposed to park their cars? Sky hooks? Is this the next phase of reality? I don't know. What are we supposed to think? People are supposed to park their cars, but they're not going to have cars? That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak?
My name is Peter Wooler. Reside at 2609 Stevens, just directly across Stevens. Been in South Minneapolis for 30 years at that location since 1995. And just in agreement, I think the most discouraging thing for me is just there's not neighborhood support for this. And the process that was done 10 years ago seemed to be some of the process that I've heard this morning, when I've heard about a library that the neighborhood come together and they loved the architecture and it was a great process. I heard about another building that was being redone, and just the kudos to that. And that should be applauded. This doesn't have neighborhood support. This building is huge. It's the biggest, it'll be the biggest building in Whittier. It's 5 stories. It's close to double the residential buildings that are directly next to it. And it just doesn't make a lot of sense when we have stuff that people invested time and energy and resource into giving their input. And now for this variance to go through is basically saying that all that time and energy that was done 10 years ago is insignificant and doesn't matter. And so that's my opinion. I appreciate everybody's time. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak? Anyone else? Okay, seeing none, I will close the public hearing. I do want to ask a question, Mr. Wittenberg. So we've had a lot of testimony and evidence presented about the soil contamination. Of course, we're a zoning body, not a pollution control body. So I actually want to ask staff. So we may have more questions about those technical details of staff or the other experts in the room, but I wanted to ask Mr. Wittenberg, if we took that aside and took that out of the equation, would that have changed staff's recommendation for approval of the FAR variance?
Chair Bender, I don't believe the recommendation would have changed. If you read the staff analysis of the floor area ratio variance, the soil conditions were just one factor. In fact, that factor is even introduced after it says in addition. So that comes after analysis of other issues that were contributing to the need for the variance. Just to remind the committee about the kind of statutory factors involved with the granting of a variance, it really comes down to whether there are unique factors, whether the applicant is proposing a reasonable use, and then the impact of that variance. And our three findings are intended to essentially mimic those statutory standards. And just to speak to a couple of other issues that have been raised, the question came up of whether economic considerations are a factor in the granting of a variance. And certainly it's the case that economic factors alone cannot be the basis for granting a variance, but they certainly can be a consideration. Finally, just to address the zoning of the property, looking back at the 2005 staff report, it appears that most of the property had been zoned C2 at that point. Part of the property was rezoned from R2B to C2 at that point, but according to the report, most of the property had been C2.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Wittenberg. Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would ask staff on this question of some neighborhood residents have stated that they have in their basement the vapor extraction that's occurring. I'm wondering if that's a realistic option when it comes to handling the pollution on the site. It sounds like already there's going to be the need to remove and reinstall a system into this proposed structure. So would that not work? Is there more to it than that?
Councilmember Johnson, I would defer that question to the applicant or to someone at the MPCA. That is not an area of expertise that I have. I am not sure how something like that would work. So I would defer to maybe the applicant's environmental consultant who's here, who would have some more background information about the kind of system that's been installed on the site since the mid-90s.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Reich.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess in terms of Councilmember Johnson's inquiry, I think staff covered the notion that that was only a factor. That's a sub-factor of the main factor around environmental. So I just wanted to put that in context.
Councilmember Reich, do you want to make a motion? Okay. Okay. Are there any more questions for staff? No, I will go ahead then and move denial of the variance appeal. I do very much appreciate the extensive involvement that folks have had in this discussion. This site has been vacant for a long time and heavily polluted. It is a challenging site. I know that there are high expectations in the community, and certainly this is a beautiful building, but it's not the building that's in front of us for consideration within the context of the legal considerations that we make. I think that staff's original recommendation is well supported. So is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? And that carries. But thank you very much, though, for your time. That brings us to item number 3, which is appeal of a non-conforming use application. We'll start with staff again.
Thank you, Chair, committee members. Again, the item before you is an appeal of a decision of the Planning Commission regarding an expansion of a non-conforming use located at 2910 and 2936 Pillsbury Avenue. The site is just south of the Midtown Greenway, Lake Street, there to the south. It's framed by Pillsbury and Pleasant. The structure itself is this upside-down U-shaped structure. The applicant sought building expansions to the first, second, third, and fourth floors. On the first floor, the applicant sought two expansions to the interior courtyard of the site, both on either corner. On the second floor, the applicant sought, again, interior to the courtyard expansions, one on each side, one in the middle. On the third floor, again, two on the side, one in the middle, as well as a 5,600 square foot addition to the north side of the structure. And this would bring the third floor flush with the second. And on the fourth floor, again, two on the side and one on the middle. And the Planning Commission did hear this application and did vote in favor of approving the application. However, they did add a condition that eliminated the expansion on the north side of the structure. So just the interior proposals to the courtyard were permitted with that. If you have any questions, I can provide any more specific details, and the applicant is here as well.
Thank you, Mr. Liska. Is there any questions for staff? Okay, with that, we'll open the public hearing. We'll start with the applicant who also appealed.
Good morning, council members. My name is Robert Speeder. I'm an attorney, practice downtown Minneapolis. I live downtown Minneapolis. My office is at 120 South 6th Street. This is a limited appeal, and we're appealing just the sixth condition with respect to Part A that was presented before the Planning Commission. There were two parts. Part A was with respect to the expansion of a non-conforming use. Part B was the site plan bulk, the approval of the site plan itself. The approval of the site plan, both of them, staff had recommended approval. I think it's important to look at Part B real quickly, because Part B was approved as is. So it's not correct to say that the additional bulk on the third floor wasn't approved, because it was. Because there was no change to the site plan. In fact, that was really, I made it in my reasons for the appeal, I quoted exactly what happened at the hearing, and it was very clear because the chair of the Planning Commission had asked Commissioner Kronzer whether the limitation applied only to Part A, and he said yes. And then when Part B came on, there were no limitations imposed. So the site plan was approved, so the bulk can be built. The question is, what can be built what can the bulk be used for? So I think the best way to, first of all, I'm just going to, a little brief history, because maybe not all the members here are familiar with this project. Carmel Mall was in 2003, was first approved as a farmer's market. And as a farmer's market, as the council may or may not know or remember, that the definitions of a farmer's market changed. And so, for no fault of the applicant, it became a non-conforming use, a legal non-conforming use. And all parties are in agreement that it is now considered a shopping center. And it's a legal non-conforming use as a shopping center. In 2010 and 2012, there were approvals for the expansion of the non-conforming use for the third floor, the part that's built today. And I'll show you diagrams in a second. And in 2014, there was approval of a site plan for the fourth floor, which has been built. The mall is highly successful. For example, it was featured on the top page, top of the folds on August 31st, as a highly successful for the immigrants, and Somali immigrants. And it's a jewel for Minnesota and Minneapolis, and I think it should be treated as such. And as such, it shouldn't be treated differently than other malls. And so here's where we come into it. So if we look at what was approved, this is the first floor. Now the yellow is all built already. It's been approved. It's a non-conforming use as a shopping mall. The two orange little spots are what was approved recently for new construction, both in bulk and as a non-conforming use. So we have no questions on the first floor, but we can just see it's those little orange areas. Similarly, on the second floor, the yellow has all been approved. It's been built. What we're talking about, the expansion, is the orange. It's just those little areas that help make the parking lot work. And the parking lot's new. It's a 4-story parking lot that has alleviated really the traffic and parking problems. The third floor is where we get into the issues. Again, the yellow is built, approved. Everybody agrees that that's legal non-conforming use as a shopping mall. The orange is what's been is bulk that's been approved. Everybody agrees that that's been approved as additional legal non-conforming use as a shopping mall. It's the blue that has not been approved as an expansion of the non-conforming use, although the bulk was approved. So then what we get is we get a mall that below it is approved for non-conforming use. To its south is approved, and to its east it's approved. But for some reason, and there were no findings to address it, it wasn't approved for those 5,000 or so square feet. The fourth floor